Palm Sunday brings lessons on the purpose of church buildings, faith, heavenly versus human authority, following through after saying yes, and producing fruit. Let's review them in Matthew 21. Christianity reveals God's love. Pontius Pilate is a caricature of the failure of human governments. Let's compare God's wonderful government, the kingdom of heaven, in the Palm Sunday parade. Who set the parade up? When Jesus and his disciples came near Jerusalem, he went to Bethphage on the Mount of Olives and sent 2 of them on ahead. He told them, "Go into the next village, where you'll at once find a donkey and her colt. Untie the 2 donkeys and bring them to me. If anyone asks why you're doing this, just say the Lord needs them. He'll at once let you have the donkeys." Why did this take place? This took place to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet, saying, "Say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden." Does Jesus on a humble donkey contrast dramatically with those who ride gold coaches pulled by thoroughbreds or expensive limousines? The disciples went and did just as Jesus directed them. They brought the donkey and the colt when they laid their robes on them, and he sat on them. Worldly leadership is self-aggrandizing and arrogant. Godly leadership is self-effacing and humble. The colt symbolizes a new day for humanity, a change in leadership style. Those who change will join Jesus at his return. Did people think Jesus was a political messiah who came to rescue Israel from Rome? And a very great multitude spread their garments in the way. Others cut down branches from the trees and strawed them in the way. Palm Sunday not only fulfilled prophecy, but mocked Pontius Pilate, the governor of Roman Judea. Pilate insulted the Jews by hanging worship images of the emperor throughout Jerusalem and minted coins with both pagan and Jewish religious symbols. Jesus' insulting parade could have obtained a death sentence for him. History shows Pilate marching into West Jerusalem as Christ entered from the north, a challenge to the government of the day. The world comes with a war horse. Heaven's king came on a donkey's colt. What did the people shout? Now the crowds going ahead of him and those who followed were shouting, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord! Hosanna in the highest!" Who did they think Jesus was? What does this foreshadow? When Jesus entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred and asked, "Who is this?" The crowds answered, "This is Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee." When Jesus returns, he will be riding a white horse. Passover pilgrims chanted, "Hosanna, save now. Let's welcome the King of Peace into our lives." Pontius Pilate is a caricature of human leadership failure. Palm Sunday symbolizes the humility of God's government. Let's be a part of the future. Join God's kingdom today. Hosanna, Lord, save us now. You decide. What abuse of the temple did Jesus confront? Jesus entered the temple and began to drive out all the people buying and selling animals for sacrifice. He knocked over the tables of the money changers and the chairs of those selling doves. He said to them, "The scriptures declare, my temple will be called a house of prayer, but you've turned it into a den of thieves." When criticized by religious authorities, what did Jesus say? What did even children recognize that some religious leaders did not understand? The lame and the blind came to him in the temple, and he healed them. But when the chief priests and the scribes saw the wonderful things that he did, and the children who were crying in the temple and saying, "Hosanna to the Son of David," they were indignant and said to him, "Do you hear what these are saying?" Jesus said to them, "Yes. Did you never read, out of the mouth of children and nursing babies, you have perfected praise." He left them and went out of the city to Bethany and camped there. What did Jesus do to a fig tree? Early in the morning, as Jesus was returning to the city, he was hungry. He saw a fig tree along the road, but when he came to it, he found nothing except leaves. Then he said to it, "You'll never again bear fruit." The fig tree dried up at once. When the disciples saw it, they were amazed. "How did the fig tree dry up so fast?" they asked. What was Jesus' explanation? Do we have that kind of faith? But Jesus said to them, "If you have faith and don't doubt, I promise you can do what I did to this tree, and you'll be able to do even more. You can tell this mountain to get up and jump into the sea, and it will. If you have faith when you pray, you'll be given whatever you ask for." Is religious authority always from God? Let's discern as we explore Jesus' confrontation with religious leaders over his authority and the parable of the two sons. Did religious leaders question Jesus' authority? When he entered the temple complex, the chief priests and the elders of the people came up to him as he was teaching and said, "By what authority are you doing these things? Who gave you this authority?" Jesus had the highest authority possible, direct from God the Father. Can we discern between heavenly and human authority? What was Jesus' answer? And Jesus answered and said to them, "I also will ask you one thing, which if you tell me, I in like wise will tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, from where was it? From heaven or of men?" We cooperate with faulty human church authorities, but if they should permit or encourage sin, we submit to heaven. Why did the religious leaders dither? They discussed it among themselves and said, "If we say from heaven, he'll ask them, why didn't you believe him? But if we say of human origin, we're afraid of the people, for they all hold that John was a prophet." So they answered Jesus, "We don't know." What was Jesus' answer? Is refusing to answer a question always an option? And Jesus responded, "Then I won't tell you by what authority I do these things." Jesus answered a deceitful question with a skillful question and ultimately refused to give an answer. We don't always have to answer a hostile question. Under what circumstances may a non-answer be the best answer? You decide. Have we ever changed our minds after giving a yes or no answer to a request? Let's look at the parable of the two sons. But what do you think? A man had two sons, and he came to the first and said, "Son, go work today in my vineyard." He answered, "I will not." But afterward he changed his mind and went. He came to the second and said the same thing. He answered, "I'm going, sir." But he didn't go. Which of the two did the will of his father? They said to him, "The first." Jonah also said no at first. How did Jesus explain the parable to the religious leaders? Jesus said to them, "I assure you that tax collectors and prostitutes are entering God's kingdom ahead of you. For John came to you on the righteous road, and you didn't believe him. But tax collectors and prostitutes believed him. Yet even after you saw this, you didn't change your hearts and lives, and you didn't believe him." Are we like those religious leaders? What would Jesus say to us? Have we initially said yes, but not followed Christ? You decide. What kind of faith is saving faith? Let's look at living faith, its fruit, its evidence, and the parable of the vineyard. Jesus told the chief priests and leaders to listen to this story. A landowner once planted a vineyard. He built a wall around it and dug a pit to crush the grapes in. He also built a lookout tower. Then he rented out his vineyard and left the country. When it was harvest time, the owner sent some servants to get his share of the grapes. But the renters grabbed those servants. They beat up one, killed one, and stoned one of them to death. He then sent more servants than he did the first time, but the renters treated them in the same way. Finally, the owner sent his own son to the renters because he thought they would respect him. Does this picture the persecution of God's prophets? Pashur beat Jeremiah. Jezebel killed prophets. Joash stoned Zechariah. What did they do to the owner's own son? But when the tenants saw the son, they said to themselves, "This is the heir. Come, let's kill him and have his inheritance." And they took him and threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. What did Jesus ask the priests and elders? Therefore, when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those farmers? He'll completely destroy those terrible men, they told him, and lease his vineyard to other farmers who'll give him his produce at the harvest. How did Jesus reply? Jesus said to them, "Did you never read in the Scriptures, the stone which the builders rejected, the same is become the head of the corner? This is the Lord's doing, and it's marvelous in our eyes. Therefore say I to you, the kingdom of God shall be taken from you, and given to a nation bringing forth the fruits thereof. And whosoever shall fall on this stone shall be broken, but on whomsoever it shall fall, it'll grind him to powder." Did they understand who Jesus was talking about? What did they want to do but were afraid to? When the chief priests and the Pharisees heard his parables, they understood that he was speaking about them, and although they sought to arrest him, they feared the crowds, since they considered him to be a prophet. Let's summarize this passage in 4 dimensions: literally, allegorically, morally, and eternally. This is a story of a literal betrayal by murderous tenants, but of course it goes much deeper than that. The spiritual meaning contains 3 more dimensions. First, this is an allegory picturing people killing God's servants down through the ages. It's also a moral lesson, suggesting that we also can reject or accept those messengers that God sends. Finally, there are eternal implications for accepting or rejecting God's servants. The kingdom of God will be given to a people who will produce its fruit. Are we? What fruit are we allowing God to produce in us? You decide.